Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on today's Master Guru class. My name is Sue, and I am the head of growth at Gooroo. Today, I will be joined by Robert Frankfurt. Robert is the founder of the Living Fund and has invested in a broad array of industries. He has now shifted his focus to early stage lifestyle, health, and wellness. Robert launched the Living Fund to accelerate and scale the mission to make solutions more readily available to those most in need. Thank you so much for joining us today, Robert.
Thank you, Sue.
How are you doing?
Doing well. It's a beautiful day.
Perfect. Great. So I guess first thing for just our viewers, could you tell me a little bit about the highlights of your career and some of the different projects and initiatives you've been a part of?
Sure. Yeah. So after graduating from college, I worked on Wall Street in investment banking for a few years. It was a coveted job, but I didn't covet it so much. I spent 3 years working there. Learned a lot, but I just didn't like the work-life balance. And so I ended up taking some time and traveling the world. I took 2 years off and I went out and explored and figured I'd get some life learning experiences, which is exactly what I did. And when I went out, it was during the fall of the Berlin Wall. So I got to be in some really cool places at the right time, completely fortuitous. And when I came back, I had a different mindset towards work. Still wanted to work hard, but I wanted to be really connected with what I was doing. And so I'd say one of the first really great experiences I had in work was when we had acquired a business. I was working with a hedge fund, and we had acquired a business. It was a struggling business, and the president quit. And
Wow.
I was the younger of 2 partners. And I remember, just because I knew the names of the equipment in the factory and what the equipment can do, the general partner put his arm around me and said, "Congratulations, you're now president." And so I spent 1.5 years, 2 years turning that business around, doing some add-on acquisitions. And, it allowed me to put all that learning, all the life experiences to work in dealing with people. And so, yeah, a great takeaway is getting P&L responsibility as soon as possible and getting around people and learning how all people are different, but yet some similarities between as well.
Great. And you mentioned traveling for 2 years. Where did you travel to? Did you have any crazy stories or most exciting stories that you had from that time?
Yeah, I mean, I think in every country I try to have at least one crazy story and an exciting story. You name it, I traveled all around in Europe. I went to visit my dad's hometown in a small town in Poland.
Wow.
And walked around knocking on doors till I could find somebody that made my dad's family. And I had a very funny experience where I met this older woman. I don't know if she had a visitor in a long time. And I'm sitting there in her house and she's feeding me food. And I gotta be honest, it wasn't the best of food. And I was so polite. And anytime she walked out of the room, I tried to feed her dog. And even the dog, who looked like he hadn't eaten in a while, even he
Didn't
wouldn't
want
take the scraps. And I was like, wow, there's something going on here. um,
it.
and it turned out when I got home, my dad explained to me, he was a little upset with me. It wasn't even our house. She didn't really speak English. I didn't speak Polish. And we tried to communicate on German, but I don't really speak German either. So it was,
And then you left the house with a handful of food in your napkin in your
yeah,
pocket.
exactly. And she was probably really confused, but happy to have a visitor.
Wow. It would have been some story if there was actually someone related to you, and but also otherwise that's great. And I know that you mentioned that you studied economics and then went on to pursue an MBA, but you also mentioned that that wasn't exactly what you were looking for. I think growing up, what had propelled you to pursue that path originally?
Well, so coming out of high school, so my dad was a Holocaust survivor, and part of my journey to go visit Poland and places like that was to sort of just better understand my roots. And so I was the youngest of three kids, and I was the great hope in terms of being the doctor in the family. And I was actually accepted into a 6-year med program out of high school. And about 3 or 4 or 5 months into it, I realized it's not my dream; it's somebody else's dream. And thankfully, my professors and administrators also recognized it wasn't my dream, mostly because my grades weren't so good. And so I was sort of disinvited from the program, and I felt it was a good mutual separation. So that freed me up to say, oh, well, what is next for me? And just through a friend who was a senior at college, recommended, you don't really belong in this college. Maybe you should go somewhere else. He meant it in the nicest way possible, that maybe I should go to a city type college. And that's how I ended up transferring to Penn. And I loved it there. And it was a tremendous experience. But I didn't start off in business. I just transferred to Penn, and then another friend said, you should consider Wharton. So I did.
Wow,
It's that simple.
great. And I guess with that in mind, if you would have to choose your major again in 2020, given everything you know now, do you think you would choose the same major or would you switch to another one?
So I focused on entrepreneurial studies,
Mhm.
which is exactly what I'm involved in today, which is spending my day with entrepreneurs, chatting with them, helping them build their business. And so I think it was appropriate for what I do, but all the life lessons that came from all the other experiences I had have been very, very much impactful in my life. And so, as I mentioned to you earlier, I have a couple of kids who are going into high school and in middle school. And the truth is, I don't always talk to them about college. There's so many different ways to learn. Uh, my kids learn a lot on YouTube these days, especially in the virtual world. My oldest son is learning how to play guitar
On
via
his
YouTube
own? Oh, wow.
during time of COVID. I bought him a guitar and I said, "Have at it," and he started to take to it. So
Wow.
there's so many ways to learn. So you know, in real time, if my kids decide to take a year and go do something different before going to college, if going to college at all, I'm okay with that because I know I learned a lot more uh, outside of college than I did in college.
Great. Have they expressed any interest in other fields or are they still just testing out the waters?
I think they're testing out the waters, and usually young kids have different, they
Yeah.
navigate towards a baseball player or a chef or this. A
Hmm.
lot of it is, they're still figuring it out. But when I went to visit Penn, my oldest son said he wants to go to Wharton undergrad. So that came out of nowhere. So we'll see.
Wow, great. And you mentioned being able to talk to a lot of entrepreneurs when you're looking at investing at startups. What are some qualities that you look for?
Yeah. So intelligence in the form of raw intelligence, but also in the form of emotional intelligence. It was something that I lacked in my own life. And I didn't know I was lacking it until I realized it. And so in the last 5 years, I've done a lot more work on the emotional side and uh, better understanding other people's situations and the motivation for things, and also better understanding, how I'm making decisions, not to people please, to be true to my spirit, to say what I mean, but I don't have to say it mean. There's so many different ways that I look at life now that I didn't look at life. And so when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, granted, they tend to be half my age on average. So I guess I'm looking for that ability for that person to see growth out of that person, and growth in the way of being able to pivot. Most business models that I've come across, their first idea is just the beginning. It's just the genesis. And quite often they have to pivot. And so I look for the ability to pivot, either proof of their pivoting, or do I feel like they are not so beholden to one idea that they can't pivot.
Got it. And you recently founded the Living Fund. Can you walk me through what sort of inspired you to start this venture and also sort of pivot towards health and wellness?
Sure, of course. So I was running a hedge fund. I was invested in a women's plus size retailer, the parent company of Lane Bryant. And the reason for the investment had to do with typical Wall Street things around some of the parts analyses and capital allocation decisions. But the takeaway was the obesity epidemic and the related chronic illness epidemic. And when I tried to apply that learning to other public companies, I felt like the public companies at that time were focused on maintenance of status quo versus reversal and prevention. Uh, I saw the unbelievable numbers around chronic illness, and then I also, as I did my research, I started to understand that a person's lifestyle can have be a great impact on whether you have chronic illness or not. The food we eat, the sleep we get, the community we keep, uh, the addictions we have, the emotional health we have. Uh, it's a 360-degree view, of course, exercise and education. So I started to look at businesses that I felt were trying to tackle chronic illness through lifestyle.
Great. And I guess with that in mind, what are some trends that you have seen in the past couple of years, and where do you think the industry is going now with everything going on with COVID?
Sure. So I'll answer the last question first, which is I view COVID as a lifestyle illness. Recently, the CDC came out and mentioned that 94% of COVID deaths, I think the statistic was that they had two other underlying issues. I'm assuming those are chronic illness conditions, and I'm assuming maybe one of those might have been obesity, or at least
Mhm.
high prevalence of it. And the other was a majority of them were older in age. And so I view COVID as a lifestyle illness, most impacting people who are suffering from chronic illness or obesity, and also don't have the means, access. So that's a big part of what I do, which is I find companies that are 1% solutions and I help them become more mass market solutions. Uh, if it's just a 1% type solution for people who can afford, it's great. It could be a successful
Mhm.
business and you could do well with it, but it's just not as exciting for me.
Got it. Could you give us an example of a company that you've worked with that sort of initially started out as 1% and how you were able to work with them to make it
Sure. So,
appeal to the masses?
sure thing. So my second investment is in a company called Parsley Health. you know, I, I, I took a very roundabout way to get to them, but it was through networking, which is, I would say, such a key part. Maybe a takeaway from this conversation is network. Just talk to people, even if you don't have a common ground with them. Talk to them, find out who they are, what they're about, and you just never know. Just be open to meeting people of all types. And I met Parsley via like my 10th connection in this chain of people because I was just interested in functional medicine. I had met a functional medicine doctor. Functional medicine is around the root cause of illness. Instead of treating the symptoms, you look at root cause. It made sense to me. when I met this functional medicine doctor who was sort of a celebrity functional medicine doctor, he really resonated with me. So I was like, I want to invest in this space. So how do I do it? And through friends, I met other people and kept meeting and meeting. And on like the 9th meeting I had, I didn't really feel like, I didn't smell the money. I don't know how to describe it. You have to get a nose for these things. I didn't smell the money around this idea that the person was working on. And he also wasn't a doctor. So before I hung up the phone, I asked him, well, who is your doctor? And it was Parsley Health. And so I called Parsley Health and I spoke with Robin Berzin, the founder. And within 15 minutes, she just reminded me of like the women I was friends with at University of Pennsylvania. I just a take charge person who can just keep moving forward and, get straight A's, be social, do all the things you got to do in university. And she's been exactly that. She started off as she was the 1% solution. She was working with a really high-end functional medicine doctor when she came up with the idea of using technology to really help to lower the cost and give access to people, initially around primary care functional medicine. So, how you were born, were you born C-section? Were you breastfed? What's your family genetics? Look at, some advanced blood test markers to see what's truly going on with your body, how you eat, how you sleep. It was so different than the typical primary care experience that I've had that it made total sense. Her ability to bring it to a price point that was more approachable made it more available for more city dwellers initially who are in their 20s and 30s. I think, and female, so I think probably you're the target. But I also recognized in time that insurance companies would pick up on the idea that prevention is a much better investment than maintenance of chronic illness. And so I think that's, so fast forward a few years, 4 years, she's actually had 2 kids during these 4 years, but has still been able to kick butt running the business. And also she has a nationwide telemedicine practice. So you can see a Parsley Health doctor anywhere you live in America. And the price points have come down. And also my hope is within a year that they'll start taking in-network insurance. Right now it's out of network, but I think it'll be in-network sooner than later. And then it's more of a mass market solution.
And especially right now with telemedicine and COVID, I'm sure business must be booming.
Yeah, it's a good time to be in healthcare if you're doing it right.
And I think something you hear a lot in businesses is not being afraid to fail. So can you share with us a time where you may have considered it a failure, but what you took away from that experience?
Sure. I mean, I failed at everything I've done, when I was a wrestler in high school, I didn't win every tournament. When I was in college, I had to pull out a 6-year med program because I didn't have success there. When I was working in banking, I was just like an okay banker. I just wasn't really excited by it. In the hedge fund world, I made plenty of not so great investments. But actually, like the learning from doing the hedge fund investing, I used to be an activist investor in undervalued businesses in the small cap marketplace. And I realized I kept coming up with companies that were good business models, had pretty decent assets, but were poorly run. And I kept thinking, well, I can just replace management and build value. The truth is, bad management usually hires not the best of employees. And so you have this cockroach theory where, like, if you see one cockroach, there's many more behind it. And so I've actually taken the opposite view today in businesses I do invest in now. It really is about that entrepreneur and that vision and their ability to communicate that vision, to raise capital around that vision, and to bring in a team of people around them, and to continue to pivot and do all those things. The types of people I'm investing in, they're younger, maybe less experienced, but they show all the markings of really capable entrepreneurs.
And that sort of
And I
hints
learned
at the
that from
part of,
in other areas of business.
And that hints at what you mentioned about emotional intelligence and what you look for when you're talking to more people.
Say that again. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say it hits upon sort of that emotional intelligence that you said that you really look for when you talk to new entrepreneurs.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the, I would say it's a trick, but it's not really a trick. It's just the approach I take. I'm much more straightforward, much more honest, sharing my life experience,
Hmm.
sharing my failures. When I do that, the entrepreneur senses that I'm much more real, and they talk to me in a much more real way. And it's not such a formal business-like conversation.
Hmm.
So then I can really get at who the person is. Uh, and by the way, sharing my failures with my sons, uh, we laugh about it, and it enables them to look at me as like a human being, not just this dad figure that's perfect, because I'm not perfect.
Yeah. And I guess you had mentioned before about investment banking and the work-life balance. What does your typical workday look like now? And you can share both pre-COVID when you're able to go out and now what your day looks like at home.
Sure, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a little journey back to an earlier part of my life when I was on that trip around the world.
Hmm.
You asked me something interesting I did. I was in India, and this is when I was around 25, 26.
Hmm.
I was in India, and I was at an ashram, because back in the day, that's where you went to do yoga and have
Hmm.
that kind of spiritual experience. And but you had to go to India to do it. Now you can do it almost from your own house. And I did a therapy session, and when I was at this ashram, and the idea that I was working on was having a work-life balance. And
Hmm.
the guru who I was talking to, and this is unusual for me. I'm not like this guru type.
Hmm.
Well, guru, yeah. I
Yeah.
guess I'm a guru enthused person, but I didn't tend to do these kinds of things. But I was open to
Hmm.
the experience, and he helped me visualize a business success and a work success and a life success, and try to build a bridge between the two. And it was an awakening for me, but it took me another 25 years to actually feel that, and that's
Hmm.
what I'm doing today. In the last 5 years, uh, that work-life balance. Uh, I wake up, I eat pretty healthy. I try to sleep a good amount of sleep. So all the things that I'm investing in, all the businesses I'm investing in, I'm also a customer or a user of the product or service. Uh, I'm going to take this off my finger, but it's an Aura ring,
Oh,
and I don't know if you can see it, but
is
it
it
has.
like a pressure point?
So what it is it's a sleep tracker.
Oh.
It has sensors built in that helps you measure each of these phases of sleep, and uh, also measures your body temperature, your heart rate variability, your respiratory rate, and it creates a baseline with which it then builds off of, so you can understand like what's going on in my body while I'm sleeping. Uh, I used it as a sleep tracking device. It has helped me greatly to improve my sleep. Uh, and also, by the way, in the time of COVID, it's been found through some research studies that have been done just in the last 6 months that it can indicate symptoms of COVID up to 3 days before it shows up. So,
Wow.
as a result, the NBA, the WNBA, and NASCAR, to name three organizations, have given it to all of their employees to use while we
Wow.
try to find a cure.
And how do you happen to know the science behind how they're able to track the COVID symptoms outside of the temperature checks?
Yeah, so they create a baseline uh, uh, on your heart rate variability and your respiratory rates.
Hmm.
And based on that and your body temperature, as well as your sleep patterns, and there's a baseline created. And then when you start to differentiate
Hmm.
greatly from those
Hmm.
baselines, if your body temperature goes up, or if the various heart rate variability goes down, uh, some of those other factors they haven't completely disclosed.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah,
that's from what I understand.
cool. Appreciate that. Get to learn something new. And I'm sure you are really well aware of like all these new trends that are happening or new initiatives within health and wellness. Are there any other ones that you've recently sort of gotten to know better, have really just started to take on for yourself?
Sure. So um, my most recent investment, they're in stealth mode, so I'll just talk
Hmm.
generally about it. But it's a saliva tester that's going to measure cortisol levels.
Oh,
and make it very easy for you to do it. Imagine like an electric toothbrush head that while you're brushing your teeth is measuring your saliva and measuring cortisol levels. And cortisol is a fight or flight thing, and it helps you to detect if you're going to maybe have a heart attack, a stroke, if you're going through anxiety or depression, fatigue. And oh, by the way, it's one of the leading indicators of a bad COVID outcome.
oh.
So the idea of wearables and other sort of digital therapeutic devices that
Mhm,
allow you to, in essence, not have to wait 3, 6, 12 months for a lab test or a doctor's visit to figure out that you have a problem. You can
mhm.
literally just be carrying in your pocket like you carry your cell phone.
Wow,
And I feel like
amazing.
that's another level of personalization in healthcare
Yeah,
that's going to be groundbreaking.
definitely. Wow, that's exciting to hear about. And I guess a lot of our students and our viewers are probably similar in age to both your sons. A lot of them are middle schoolers and high schoolers. You touched upon networking. Are there any other, do you have any specific advice for them on how they can network or any other sort of takeaways?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, at that age, I feel like it's great to have an open mind. I feel it's great to have an open mind at all ages. So
Hmm.
try not to get too locked down on any one theory or one idea about how you should live your life, and instead just try to enjoy that journey for today, and to be present. Maybe put down the electronic devices from time to time, and just look somebody in the eye and just start talking to them. And it could be a person from a different background or someone you never met before, and learn what makes them tick. And if you have that skill set, it's going to really play well when you get to college, if you decide to go to college.
Hmm.
And you know by the way, I wasn't great at these things. Like I naturally had lots of friends, but I felt like in a certain way as a networker, I had one arm tied behind my back because I didn't have the emotional intelligence to understand what I'm telling now, what I'm speaking to now.
Hmm.
So this comes from life experience. I'm a way better networker today because I speak my truth. I don't try to be perfect. I try to be as imperfect as I can be, and allow people to just share with me and just listen. So I do a lot more listening than I do talking.
Got it. Thank you
Other
so
than
much for
my podcast.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that advice. I think we're going to wrap up. Is there any last minute things you'd like to tell our viewers before we hop off?
Yeah, I would say the other thing is, around there's so many amazing young companies like Gooroo,
Mhm.
and if you want to learn about uh, these kinds of companies, I think it's a great way to find out about career opportunities. So whether you're in high school or college, to go and try to do internships, even if they're unpaid, just so you can have that experience and exposure. That's a great way to help you to better understand what you should major in college, what degree you want to go to. I know there's a lot of people that go to high school, college, and then they go to law school, and then they wake up and they're like, wow, they've actually never done anything in law before. And when they actually go and do the law, they're like, ooh, I don't really like it too much. So try to get some
Mhm.
experience, even if it's basic level experience, to see what it's like to work in that environment.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to hear more about your story and learn more about from your advice. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sue. It's a pleasure.
Okay, great. I think that'll wrap it up for today. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.